Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our daily word today. Today, it is Wednesday, March 9th. Glad you could join me for our few minutes together as we continue our conversation about our daily word. Interesting this morning that it was snowing really early this morning. Didn't expect snow to be happening today, but it is March, and so we have a ways to go in this season. So, I've chosen for this morning, and I continue to take excerpts from my 3 Lenten devotionals that I use every morning. And from this particular devotional, it's entitled The Need and the Knowing. And the scripture is from the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verses 26 through 28. And we hear these words. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." So this is a part of a bigger conversation following the resurrection. The disciples have been locked in the upper room because they were afraid, and we can hardly blame them, for being afraid in this moment in their life. And when Jesus appears to them earlier, Thomas isn't there. And when they say to Thomas, "Jesus appeared to us," he didn't believe it. And so, for some reason, it's not scriptural at all, but for some reason, we have dubbed him Doubting Thomas. It's a derisive name that's endured 2,000 years after the story has happened. This name has stuck to him, Doubting Thomas. But it seems like, in this story, we've really never gotten it right about who Thomas is and what his problem was, or what his concerns were, or what his doubts were, I suppose. I suppose, that we can take it for granted that this disciple, Thomas, was simply doubting in his blanket lack of belief, when he simply couldn't, in his mind, fathom the news that Jesus' resurrection had happened was even possible. And he couldn't believe it, or wouldn't believe it, without some tangible proof that he could touch with his hands, wrap his arms around. And I suppose, we could look back at the disciples. So if you remember the story well, after the resurrection, Jesus appears to the disciples, and they are afraid. Of course, they're afraid. And Jesus simply offers them peace. Now, it doesn't say their fears were put aside. It just reminds us that they were afraid. They were there the first time. Their fears haunted them as they went along. For Thomas, we hear this thing about, it's couched in the word doubt, but really it's this idea and this problem that we seem to have. We want all the information that we can possibly get in our life to fully embrace everything that's happening in the world. And we garner information, and sometimes we say, when we can't quite understand it right, that we can't put our hands around it, we can't figure it out, we really want to read it or touch it or hear it for ourselves. We're really no different than Thomas was. Jesus, his response to Thomas is something that I find great solace in. It's not condemning, it's not scolding, but he accommodates Jesus. He meets Jesus, he meets Thomas right where he is, in his doubt, in his fears, in his worries. He meets him right where he is in this skeptical moment. He doesn't berate him for his own internal barriers to belief, but he meets him there and allows Thomas in that moment to experience and to know that Thomas then could find peace. Here we are in the midst of our world, right? And the lives that we live. And there's so much information that's thrown at us every day. You know, if you're like me, you can't possibly digest it all. And so you try to figure out what's right and what's wrong, what's real and what's not real. And even in our journey of faith, right? We sometimes struggle with skepticism and what does this really mean and how does Scripture really speak to me? We don't always find faith easy and natural as it comes to us, and maybe we really shouldn't. We too find ourselves in the midst of intellectual doubt. We find ourselves not knowing, and that simple belief doesn't always come easy for us. But here we are. The story with Thomas, I think, gives us hope. That not only does God know exactly when and why we struggle in our beliefs, but that God meets us where we are in those struggles, helps the cloudy things in our life become clear. Eventually, they become clear. There's always, almost always, I think for us, a gap between the need and the knowing. But God meets us in the middle there and helps us along our life's journey. So, in the season of Lent, you know, when we hear all these stories and we're going to hear some interesting gospel lessons this morning, this Sunday, even this Sunday's scripture that we're going to hear of Abram, you know, who God meets in life and changes him. That's really the foundation of where our life story begins. You know, Abraham doesn't understand it all, but God meets him in his doubt and moves him to the next place in life. And I think that's good news for us, isn't it? You know, that we don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to just 100% say we believe no matter what. In the example of Thomas, who we give a hard time to, Jesus doesn't throw him under the bus, doesn't condemn him, doesn't challenge him. Jesus simply says, here you go, Thomas. Here you go. Put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. He just meets him where he is. I don't know about you, but in my life, I need God to just meet me where I am. You know, I've been struggling the last couple of days with this healing. You know, kind of hit a wall in my recovery, and it's been the last 2-3 days have been a real struggle for me. And so, you know, you try to figure out where all that's at. And in the midst of that, you know, I pray a lot and I think about it a lot and I try to do what it is that I need to do. And I know in the midst of my struggle the last couple of days especially, that I've simply like this, just asked God to meet me where I am because I'm just really struggling. And I think it's true for us in all of our life. God meets us where we are. God moves in us. God continues to shape us. And then God says, Jim, stop doubting and believe. That's good news for us. God meets us in the distance, meets us right where we are, and helps us to move forward. And I think where we are in life, where we are in the world's condition, where we are in our faith journey as it's taken us through this season of Lent, where we are in our own personal life's journey, that we just trust that God meets us where we are. And so if you're like me, and you've had your struggles the last few days, and you're unsure of where it is that we're supposed to be, think about Thomas. Think about Thomas, who said, look, you can tell me whatever you want about Jesus being here, but unless I see it, I'm just not going to believe it. And Jesus met him right there. Jesus met him right there where he was, in his doubts, if you want to call them that, and picked him up. And I think and I hope that that's good news for us in our own life's journey and faith journey, that we just know that when we have our own doubts, whatever they're about, and I have my doubts the last couple of days, am I ever going to get better? That God just meets us where we are. And so I pray that's a good word, a daily word that we could hold on to today, that it would help us in our life's journey to continue to move forward. And as I said Sunday morning, in our sermon Sunday morning, as I talked about what it means to lean toward God. And I'm going to look that up real quick, just as a reminder. What I said Sunday morning, and what I think this is important for us to hear again as we live our lives together. I said this: we should be those who are busy bending our lives toward God. We should be those who are busy bending our lives toward God. Maybe our bending today is this recognition of our own doubts and knowing that God meets us right where we are. And that's us bending toward God. So, hold on to that, if you will, today for our daily word. And I pray you'll know of God's presence meeting you right where you are. Know of God's love and grace that surrounds you. Know of my love for you. I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I'm off to therapy, and I'm off to a doctor's appointment yet again because I'm still struggling with this wound of mine, this incision that doesn't want to get healed up appropriately. So, I look forward to seeing you after all of these things. We'll gather again tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, expecting God, knowing God meets us right where we are. Have a great day.